Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
The story.
You have this innate desire to be at one with God and you want to have a relationship with Him, but Islam does not have that. There is no relationship with God. God is a high and mighty being somewhere in the nebulous that you cannot access. So that is one thing that I found was completely void in my life. And it was important for me at that stage in my life. I wanted to know, do I have any meaning of life at all?
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colfax. Welcome to The Story. Well, usually when someone puts their faith in Jesus, it's the beginning of solving many of the problems in their life. And to a certain extent, that was the case for Ash Saleh. But as a former Muslim, it was also the beginning of many new problems, because his parents were strongly opposed to him becoming a Christian. He's chatting and sharing his story with Karen Hunt.
Now, he was born to Egyptian parents, a former Muslim. He converted to Christianity here in Australia during his university days. He has two passions, photography and evangelism to Muslims. Let's hear his very unique, special story and find out firstly where he was born and about his parents' journey as well.
They came over to Australia in 1972 or so with my father. I was probably about 25. He decided that Egypt was not politically a favourable environment for him to be in. So he decided to come out and check out what Australia was like when it opened its doors in the early 70s, the heyday of immigration. So I suppose since then he fell in love with the place and decided to get married and bring over his new wife over to Sydney, all the way from Egypt. Left the whole family there. He was the first one, I suppose, in the family to have left the family to go overseas.
That's a very brave move for them. I mean, your parents, they were Muslim. They are Muslim, born into very strict and a tight-knit Islamic family. And, of course, families like that centre their lives around their faith, hey?
Oh, certainly. Everything they do is focused on what Islam would command them to do. And it gives them, I suppose, a lot of structure in their lives. And what they do is basically trying to follow or emulate the Prophet Muhammad in everything that they do. So when they sit down to eat, they thank God. When they're praying, they're always thanking God. When they're joking together, they praise God. So it's a lesson in faith, I suppose, a lot to look at how they live.
Ash, it's interesting to read that as a young Muslim boy, you're actually sent to a Catholic school. You went to the Marist Brothers College in Coogee in like years 6, years 7. Was it confusing for you going to a Catholic school but living a life at home with a Muslim family?
At that age, I don't think you question anything. I started off in the whole way through primary school going through the Catholic school system. So first of all, St Joseph's in Maroubra in Sydney, then going on to St Mary's in the Kensington area, I believe it was. I can't even remember now, it's that far back. And that was year 3 and 4. And then from year 5 and 6, that was Marist Brothers in Coogee. And I think from my point of view, I just followed. I simply just agreed to learn about things the way that they were taught in the Catholic school system. My parents did try hard to get me out of having to do a compulsory religious education, but there were certain lessons that I couldn't be exempt from, and I remember going through them, but I never had questioned it, never thought that was something that I just didn't believe in and I had to stand up against.
So tell us about your early adolescent years. I mean, you went to a boys' high school. You were quite short for the size of boys in your grade. What was life like in those junior high years?
They were bittersweet years. High school was great. There was a lot of personality stuff that came up, and at the same time, there's a lot of freedom. So you get to meet new friends, and your parents gave you some liberties that you never used to have before. I joined, the music group and orchestra. I loved music. Also was very keen to learn about maths and English and science. It really got me going. But I did struggle socially. It was really mainly because I was the odd one out, the only Arab, and very short, easy to pick on. I just let things happen. And so there were only a few people who really would be interested in becoming a friend. But nevertheless, I just continued to plough through, and all those shortcomings that I had, I knew I couldn't do anything about, and I just relied on learning and books, and that's all what I focused my energy on. So a lot of bullying did happen, and although it really did affect me, I tended to just ignore it as much as I could. It certainly made it difficult for me to get through high school and succeed.
And you came to a point in your life, hey Ash, where you started questioning your faith in any form of God. Can you tell us, what was that crisis like?
That was a tough time. Approximately about 13 years of age, I came to some sort of realization that I was doing all these rituals that really didn't make any meaning in my own life. Why was I doing all this stuff? Praying 5 times a day, prostrating myself in front of God, and it had to be in alignment with where the Kaaba was, which is in Saudi Arabia and Medina, in Mecca, sorry, and fasting 1 month a year, doing Ramadan. At Ramadan, to me, was more of a cultural thing than it was a spiritual thing. And all these things really, I suppose, I questioned. And I questioned them in my own mind, because if I tried to question them to my parents, they would have beaten it out of me. There was just no way they would have accepted their own son could question their form of living, their reason for living and their form of faith. Faith for them is everything. Even if they can't give you answers, they just don't want you to question it. So I lived with that doubt and all those questions, and didn't ask anyone, as I didn't have the courage to ask anyone. And all I ever knew was the Egyptian community at that stage, socially. School, really, it was just all about having fun, so there was not much serious talk going on. So I really kept that all inside for many years, even after finishing high school. I just attended these festivities and performed all the rituals out of obligation, not out of a spirit of wanting to please God.
It's a really interesting scenario, what you're saying, actually. I mean, I've heard a number of stories of Muslim people in Middle Eastern countries who've converted to Christianity. You know, they've said before there was no heart. It wasn't real. You know, since becoming a Christian, the Bible's come alive. Their prayer life has come alive. Ash, do you find that stark contrast between the two religions for you personally?
Yes, I've heard a number of those interviews with the converts from Pakistan and Afghanistan, and I relate to them so closely, even though I wasn't brought up in those countries. It is quite amazing that you have this innate desire to be at one with God, and you want to have a relationship with Him. But Islam does not have that. There is no relationship with God. God is a high and mighty being somewhere in the nebulous that you cannot access, and it's not through any means that we have on this earth that we can communicate with this God. So that is one thing that I found was completely void in my life, and it was important for me at that stage in my life. I wanted to know why I was doing this. Is there a purpose for it? Do I have any meaning of life at all? And if there is, then I'd like God to show me. And that was just not being provided. So I think that's where it comes down to. I don't think in the beginning, even though I was doing all these rituals and I was trying to follow what my father was directing me to do in the mosque and reciting the prayers, it really didn't have meaning. It didn't click with me the whole way through.
Ash, to go a little bit deeper, are you willing to share with us something of the isolation, the rejection, the extent of that persecution that you suffered during your years at uni?
It's a hard story every time I say it, because you come to a low point in your life and you look back and say that was really a dark moment. And indeed, those university years, although I really look back and have fond memories of the knowledge that I gained in it, and the open-mindedness, I also had a massive struggle with just coming to terms with why I was here. I'd come to a point where I said, God, you, if you are real, you should show yourself to me. I'm tired of having to go through this life alone and not knowing what to do with myself. I have no meaning. I have no feeling, and it's those situations when even a depressed person can relate to when they're saying that I'm numb. I'm completely numb to my emotions, and that's how I felt at the time. And I'd ask God, where are you? Can you show yourself, reveal yourself to me? And it just didn't come. But even the whole while, I knew that his hand was on me in retrospect. At the time, struggling through all these emotions, I'd cursed him. I said that you really have done yourself a disservice by creating me, and I really want to end it now. And so I planned myself to harm myself in quite a severe way in walking up the fourth story of a university building, and I planned myself to throw myself off the fourth story balcony, and I knew that would be the end of it, and it would be fantastic after that. There'd be no more hurt, there'd be no more trials, there'd be no more struggles in my mind. But that very night that I was going to rest so that I could get up and do that act, I was woken up at 2 a.m. in a drench of sweat, with my heart pounding, and an amazing sense of peace that I'd never felt before just come upon me and say, you are at peace. You have peace because I am with you. And there was no fireworks, there was no big dream, there was nothing that just came upon me except for just a sense of peace. And I just knew from then that I just couldn't go on with that plan.
And you were walking around the streets one day in Sydney. You came across a man with a toddler in a pram, and he must have just sensed your emptiness, your loneliness. He asked you if you could just have a chat with him. What happened from there?
It was something I couldn't explain. It's someone just on the streets of Sydney where you think everyone is on their own. You're all living together, but not really forming a relationship. This person just came out of nowhere, and I was walking quite aimlessly on the streets of Parramatta. And with his approach, I couldn't resist but to open up and say, look, I've been struggling. And he said, well, why don't we talk about it? And from then on, we struck a friendship. It was just amazing. He didn't introduce himself to be a Christian. He didn't tell me that this is what his faith was about. He just simply walked with me and did a journey of life, basically, going through my childhood and my parenthood, what my parents had been taking me through. And he said, look, you're going through stuff, and we all have, but you have to respect your parents, and you have to do that because it is the right thing to do, and I think you know that. And inside, deep within me, I did know that. But at the whole time, he gave me this openness and almost this unconditional love that I had been missing and didn't know had existed until then. And there was something different about him that I had to ask him, what is it that's so different about you? And he shared it. He simply said, I believe in God, and God, through Jesus Christ, has set me free.
You're listening to The Story. Today, former Muslim Dr. Ash Saleh is sharing his life journey. We just heard how he met a new friend who had a profound influence on his life and was instrumental in him putting his faith in Jesus. Next, we'll hear what happened when he told his parents about his new faith. That and more when we return.
The Story. If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colfax, and this is The Story. We're continuing with Karen Hunt chatting with former Muslim Dr. Ash Saleh. Before the break, we heard how he met a Christian man who had a profound influence on his life. Now, we'll find out what happened next in his life.
Did you actually then go to your parents yourself? Tell us what happened.
I'd joined his church in Parramatta for about 6 months. I wanted to know, I had a fervent desire and an appetite to know God in a tangible way, in a way that I'd never known before. I'd never had access to the Bible before, so this was my first interaction. And it was wonderful. For 6 months, I had learnt about God. I'd seen in these wonderful scriptures in the Old and the New Testament, stuff that I'd innately sort of appreciated even in the Quran, but never in that kind of colour and life. And so I had to share it with somebody. And after being baptised in that church, I had to come home and be open and frank with my parents. And her mum and dad, I tell you the truth now, I can't lie to you anymore. I'm a Christian, and I've been going to church, and I've just been baptised, and I want to share it with you. And I don't know how naive I could have been, but looking back at that, I think how stupid I was to have just opened up and think that they would have accepted that and appreciated it. They had beaten everything out of me, physically, verbally, emotionally. They said, "We don't want you to come back into this house unless you've rescinded everything you've ever just said to us. You've revoked your allegiance to this God that you say that you've just been baptized under, and we will not accept you in this family unless you do all of these things." And I had no choice at that age of 18. I really wasn't independent enough to feel confident to do this. So I said, "I'm sorry. I really didn't realize it was going to affect you so much, and I do. I'll do whatever you tell me, and that's fine." And from then on, they said, "You are only going to go to university, and you'll come straight home, and there's no other life for you." So I was back into a form of, I suppose, bondage, so that they could at least keep tabs on what I was doing with myself.
And this lasted for a couple of years? Is that when you went back overseas after that?
I did. I tried to appease them as much as I could, knowing in my heart that Islam wasn't right for me. Even though I'd said, "I'm going to do whatever you ask," I was doing it out of obedience, but in my heart of hearts, I knew that it was not right. So it came to a point where I'd finished university, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. So I just told my parents, "Look, I need to go and travel and just do something with my life that's positive, and although it's not meaningful and gainful employment, it's something that will at least help me discover myself." And they were totally against it. They knew that it was just another form of me trying to find my own freedom and maybe even go astray again. But I knew that I had to do it, and they finally allowed me to do that, and I went to Ghana, the very country that this migrant gentleman had introduced me to Christ. And in that country, I had seen abject poverty, and at the same time, amazing humility and a love for God, which I'd never seen before. And it wasn't that really convinced me that there was this, wonderful, mighty God who was there to love us and reach down from his throne and want to touch us in a tangible way. It was more the fact that I'd opened my eyes to see the truth about life. This is not a perfect world. We are amongst sin, and we are amongst a lot of imperfection, destitution, and almost, a turning away from God. And in that, I found peace, even though all this imperfection is around me. And even the very Christians who I met there were imperfect, and they were doing things that I knew was not right. I sensed a peace, I suppose, in the Word of God that said that, we are filthiness. Our righteousness is filthiness in front of Him. And understanding that in the context of life in general.
I'm chatting with Dr. Ash Saleh, born to Egyptian parents, a former Muslim, raised in Sydney, converted to Christianity during his university days. Ash, thanks so much for your openness in sharing your story with us. Can you tell us now what happened when you came back to Australia from the country of Ghana?
Coming back to Australia was tough. Back to my parents' home again. Same rules and regulations and expectations. But it wasn't shortly thereafter when I finished another degree at the University of Sydney that I'd met this young lady. It was through a mutual friend who I'd met through the Sydney Olympics at the time in 2000. She's very different, and I came to know her just by conversation about what life is about and where she'd come from in Kenya, and what politics is all about, and what God has in place of our lives in terms of politics and what we wanted to do, I suppose, in life. And the conversation seemed to gel so well that I wanted to get to know this person a bit more. And so it wasn't long after that I gave her a call and said, why don't we sit down and have a chat one-to-one and just talk a little bit more about what your goals in life, and we did that. And it wasn't long after that I realized this person was really meant to be, and I didn't hesitate after that. At the age of 23, that I proposed to her, and she said, "Well, look, if you want to do that, you're going to have to approach my parents and make this a bit more official." And their parents arrived in Australia to celebrate her graduation from university. It was only 6 weeks after I'd met her. And they said, well, if you're going to do it, then you have our blessing, but you must agree to it together and discuss it with your own parents. And that was my stumbling block.
Yeah.
My
Wow.
parents. I had to approach them. And so on Christine's arrival back to Australia for her to complete a master's degree in the University of Wollongong, I brought her back from the airport, took her home, and said, Mum and Dad, this is Christine. And their eyebrows rose and, of course, questioned her, well, what is she to you? I said, she's a good friend, but I'd like to make her more than that. And they said, well, if you think of marrying this person and doing it in a church and going about your own merry way, count us out. We're not part of it. You will not be our son, and I will not be your father. This will not be your mother, and you will have no further ties with us.
Oh, my goodness. And you'd actually been literally beaten by, well, not by your father as such, but by your mother over all of this, yeah?
My mother was quite upset the first time she heard that I was a Christian. And she tried to beat it out of me. She said, this is impossible. You are our son. In fact, you are our firstborn son. You should be providing a good example for your siblings. And this is the absolute worst thing that could happen to us in our lives. And we will find a way of getting this out of you. So be it, they said.
So what she felt was absolute betrayal.
It was a complete condemnation. It was the biggest slap in the face they've ever had. It couldn't be a worse case of apostasy for them. And they just didn't know what to do.
So for you pursued your relationship with Christine.
Yes.
You were married. You were out of contact with your family for what length of time?
It was about 2 years. My mother did try, but she knew that my father had completely cut me off. He essentially used the words abandonment. We will not be at all a part of your life. My mother did try, but every time that I tried to call my dad, I just got the phone cut off every single time. But 2 years on, my father's very close friend from Egypt, who migrated to Australia the very same time that he did, and whose children were very close to us, so we were all very close together, had been very sick. This man who is my father's friend, he had terminal bladder cancer, and it just so happened that he was at the end of his treatment program. He had no other options. He needed to go on a trial, and that was the only other option he had. I happened to be a clinical trial coordinator at the time, working at St George Hospital in Sydney, working on these cases of terminal cancer, which had no other treatment options. And he seemed to be enrolled in the trial that I was managing, and saw the work that I was doing and was very pleased. He just said to my father, this son of yours who you have ostracized is doing a wonderful thing for me, and you need to sort out your relationship between you and him, because there is no point in stringing on your grudges with him just on account of this faith. And I think that's what touched my father. It got to him in a way that there'd be no other way. It's kind of like the story of Pharaoh and not listening to Moses.
Yeah.
He had to heed the word of God, and this was a tug that it took my father that much to get him to come and see me at the hospital. So he came to the hospital where I was working. I got a page that I was to come to the reception at the Cancer Trial Centre, and I was expecting it to be a patient. I went there with a notebook in hand, and I saw my father there with tears down his eyes, with open arms, and saying, please come home.
Wow. You've suffered a lot of persecution, and your faithfulness, I know, will be rewarded. An inspiration. Dr. Ash Saleh, God bless you and your family. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, God be praised.
That was Karen Hunt chatting with former Muslim Dr. Ash Saleh. As we heard, he faced some profound challenges with his family once he put his faith in Christ. However, it was great to hear how the Lord worked in his life to bring about a restored relationship with his mother and father. A verse in the Bible that comes to mind in relation to Ash's story is Psalm chapter 27, verse 10. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. Comforting words for all of us. Well, thanks for joining us for Ash's remarkable story. I'm Jimmy Colfax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.